She was sold by her parents to the most feared duke in England, a man rumoured to have buried 3 wives already. But what Lady Eleanor discovers behind Blackthorne Abbey's imposing walls isn't the monster of legend, but a brilliant physician determined to challenge the very conventions that branded her worthless. Could her greatest humiliation become the key to unlocking not just her true potential, but her heart? The sun set over the Harlow estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The garden bloomed with red roses, white lilies, and purple lavender that filled the air with sweet smells. Inside the grand house, 23-year-old Lady Eleanor Harlow stood still as her maid fixed her hair for the big party tonight. "Hold steady, my lady," said Betty, sliding a pearl pin into Eleanor's dark curls. "We must make you shine brighter than any star." Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror. Her blue eyes seemed tired despite the powder that hid the dark circles beneath them. 3 years of doctor visits and whispers about why she hadn't had a baby yet had worn her down. "Thank you, Betty," Eleanor said, forcing a smile as the maid stepped back to admire her work. A knock came at the door and Eleanor's mother entered, dressed in her finest green silk dress. "Eleanor, dear, are you ready?" Lady Harlow asked, her eyes quickly checking her daughter from head to toe. "Lord Pembroke and his family will be here soon. Tonight is very important." "Yes, mother," Eleanor replied, standing up. Her cream-coloured dress rustled as she moved. "I understand what's at stake." "Good," her mother said, touching Eleanor's cheek. "The Pembrokes have waited 3 years for this match to be made official. They grow tired of waiting for proof that you can give them heirs." Eleanor felt her heart sink but kept her face calm. "I will not let you down." "You must not," her mother said, her voice dropping low. "Your father's debts grow worse each day. This match is our last hope to save the family name." Through the window, Eleanor saw the first fancy carriages pulling up on the gravel drive. Guests in bright clothes and sparkling jewels stepped out, laughing and talking as servants led them inside. "It's time," her mother said. "Remember, smile and be charming. Do not speak of your problem." Eleanor nodded and followed her mother downstairs. The great hall glowed with the light of 100 candles. Music played while servants carried trays of food and drinks. Eleanor stood by her father near the entrance, greeting each guest with a perfect curtsy and a warm smile that did not reach her eyes. "Lady Eleanor, how lovely you look tonight," said Mrs. Whitmore, an old woman who loved to spread gossip. Her eyes moved to Eleanor's flat stomach. "Still no happy news to share, I see." "Not yet, Mrs. Whitmore," Eleanor said, keeping her smile in place, "but we remain hopeful." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Whitmore said with a small laugh, "though I hear the Pembrokes grow tired of waiting. A family like theirs needs heirs, after all." Before Eleanor could answer, her father stepped in. "I'm sure you'll want some refreshment, Mrs. Whitmore. Please enjoy the party." As the woman moved away, Lord Harlow turned to his daughter. "Ignore such talk. Tonight is about making the match official." The room grew quiet as a tall man with golden hair entered. Lord Pembroke walked like he owned the room, his cold blue eyes finding Eleanor across the crowd. She curtsied as he approached. "My lord," she said, lowering her eyes as a proper lady should. "Lady Eleanor," he replied, taking her gloved hand and bringing it to his lips. "You look well." "Thank you," she said. "I hope your journey was pleasant." "It was," he said, offering his arm. "Shall we join the dance?" Eleanor placed her hand on his arm, feeling the stiff fabric of his fine coat. As they walked to the centre of the room, people stepped back to watch. The music began, and Lord Pembroke led her in the steps they had practised many times. "Your father assures me the doctors have new ideas to try," Lord Pembroke said as they turned. "My family grows impatient for an heir." "I understand," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the pain his words caused. "I pray their new treatments will work." "As do I," he said. "The match is good for both our families, but without children, what's the point?" Eleanor said nothing, focusing on the dance steps. Around them, other couples smiled and laughed, but she felt trapped in a moment of silent fear. After the dance, Eleanor stood with a group of young ladies, listening to their happy chatter about dresses and suitors. None of them knew what it was like to be examined by doctors, to have your body fail at the one thing society said made you valuable. "Eleanor, dear," called her mother, "come meet Dr. Fleming." Eleanor crossed the room to where her mother stood with a stern-looking man with grey whiskers. "Lady Eleanor, Dr. Synd," Fleming said, bowing slightly. "Your mother tells me you've been seeing Dr. Wilson about your condition." Eleanor felt her cheeks grow hot. "Yes, sir. I have new methods that might help," he said, looking at her like she was a puzzle to solve. "We can discuss them after the announcement tonight." "Thank you," Eleanor said, wishing she could disappear. As the night went on, Eleanor played her part perfectly. She smiled, danced, and spoke politely to everyone, but inside she felt like a doll being shown off before being sold. The clock struck 10, and her father called for quiet. Everyone turned to watch as Lord Pembroke stepped forward to stand beside Eleanor. "Friends," Lord Harlow said, raising a glass, "we gather tonight to celebrate the official engagement of my daughter, Lady Eleanor, to Lord Pembroke. May their union bring joy to both families." Cheers filled the room as Lord Pembroke took Eleanor's hand. She smiled, knowing that all eyes were watching to see the perfect lady she appeared to be. No one could see the fear in her heart or know that each night she cried herself to sleep, terrified of what would happen if she could not give this man a child. For tonight, she was still the jewel of society. But Eleanor knew that time was running out. The bright morning sun streamed through Eleanor's bedroom windows 3 weeks after the party. She sat at her dressing table while Betty brushed her long hair. Today was the day Lord Pembroke would visit with his family's doctor. Her stomach felt tight with worry. "My lady, you look pale," Betty said, pausing with the brush. "Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you," Eleanor replied, watching her face in the mirror. Dark circles showed under her eyes despite her best efforts to hide them. "I just need to be brave today." A knock at the door made her jump. Her mother entered, already dressed in her best visiting gown. "They're here," Lady Harlow said, her voice tight. "Dr. Reynolds and Lord Pembroke are waiting in your father's study." Eleanor stood up, smoothing her blue dress. "I'm ready." The walk down the long hallway felt like walking to her own trial. When she entered the study, 3 men turned to look at her. Her father, Lord Pembroke, and a thin man with glasses who must be Dr. Reynolds. "Ah, Lady Eleanor," the doctor said, giving a small bow. "Please sit down." Eleanor sat in the chair her father pointed to, keeping her back straight and her hands folded in her lap like a proper lady. "I've reviewed the notes from your previous doctors," Dr. Reynolds said, opening a leather folder, "and I must be direct. After examining all the evidence, I believe you will never bear children." The room went silent. Eleanor felt like all the air had been pulled from her lungs, but she did not cry. Ladies did not cry in front of others. "Are you certain?" her father asked, his voice sharp with fear. "I am," Dr. Reynolds said, closing his folder. "Science cannot fix what nature has decided." Lord Pembroke stood up, his face hard with anger. "Then I see no purpose in continuing this engagement." "My lord," Eleanor's father said, rising quickly, "perhaps there are other treatments." 3 years we've waited," Lord Pembroke cut in. 3 years of promises and hopes. My family needs heirs. Lady Eleanor cannot provide them. It's that simple." Eleanor watched the 2 men argue as if she weren't in the room. Her whole life had been planned around this marriage, around becoming a mother to continue the Pembroke family line. Now, with a few words, that future was gone. "The dowry has already been paid," her father said, his voice growing desperate. "Contracts were signed." "And they shall be broken," Lord Pembroke replied coldly. "My father's lawyer is drawing up the papers now. He will present them tonight at the Whitmore ball." Eleanor found her voice at last. "You mean to announce it publicly?" Lord Pembroke looked at her without kindness. "It's best to make these things clear to society, otherwise people talk." That evening, Eleanor stood in front of her mirror once more. Betty had dressed her in a beautiful cream gown with pearl beading. Her hair was pinned up with matching pearl clips. She looked perfect, like a doll about to be put back on the shelf. "The carriage is ready," her mother said from the doorway. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "We must face this with dignity." "Yes, mother," Eleanor said, picking up her fan and gloves. The Whitmore house blazed with light as they arrived. People stopped talking when Eleanor entered with her parents, then quickly began whispering behind their fans. News had spread fast. "Poor thing," she heard someone say. "Baron at 23. Eleanor kept her chin up and her face calm. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. Mrs. Whitmore approached, her smile wide but her eyes sharp. "Lady Eleanor, I'm so glad you came. How brave of you." "Thank you for having us," Eleanor replied, as if this were any normal party. The music played and people danced, but no one asked Eleanor to join them. She stood near a large window watching the happy couples spin around the room. Lord Pembroke had not yet arrived. "Lady Eleanor," a deep voice said behind her. She turned to see a tall man with dark eyes watching her. She had never seen him before, but something about him made her nervous. "I don't believe we've met," she said politely. "The Duke of Blackthorne," he said, with a small bow. His face had a scar along one cheek, and his black clothes made him look like a shadow in the bright room. "I've heard much about you." Eleanor felt her cheeks grow hot. "All bad things tonight, I fear." "People talk too much," the Duke said, his dark eyes studying her face, "and understand too little." Before she could reply, a hush fell over the room. Lord Pembroke had arrived with a thin man carrying a leather case. "That must be the lawyer," someone whispered loudly enough for Eleanor to hear. "Excuse me," she said to the Duke, moving to stand by her parents as Lord Pembroke and the lawyer approached. "Lord Harlow," the lawyer said with a small bow, "I have the papers dissolving the engagement between Lord Pembroke and Lady Eleanor." The room had gone so quiet that everyone could hear every word. Eleanor felt all eyes on her, waiting to see her shame. "The reason," the lawyer continued, unfolding a paper and reading from it, "is Lady Eleanor's inability to bear children, as confirmed by medical experts. The Pembroke family requires heirs to continue their noble line." Eleanor heard gasps and whispers ripple through the crowd. Her mother's hand gripped her arm tightly, either for support or to keep her from running away. "Is this necessary?" her father asked, his voice tight with anger. "To announce such personal matters in public?" "My client wishes it known that he is free to pursue other matches," the lawyer replied coldly. "The dowry will be returned, minus expenses already incurred in preparation for the wedding." Eleanor felt as if she were watching the scene from outside her body. The whispers grew louder as people talked about her right in front of her face. "She seemed so healthy," one woman said. "What use is a wife who cannot have children?" a man replied. Eleanor kept her head high as the lawyer finished reading the document. Lord Pembroke never once looked at her face. When it was done, Eleanor knew she could not stay. With perfect posture and steady steps, she walked toward the door. People moved aside, watching her go. "Lady Eleanor," the Duke of Blackthorne said, appearing at her side, "allow me to escort you to your carriage." Grateful for the small kindness, she placed her hand on his offered arm. As they walked out into the cool night air, he spoke softly. "I have a business offer for your father," he said, "one that might solve both your problems." Eleanor looked up at his scarred face, confused. "What do you mean?" "I need a wife," he said simply, "and you need to escape this cruel place." Eleanor should have been shocked, but instead she felt strangely calm. "You wish to buy me?" The Duke's mouth curved in a small smile. "I wish to offer you a choice that society would never give you." The carriage waited at the bottom of the steps. Eleanor looked back at the bright windows of the house, at the people who had just witnessed her greatest shame. "Tell your father I'll call tomorrow," the Duke said, helping her into the carriage. As the horses pulled away, Eleanor didn't cry. Ladies didn't cry where others could see, but inside she felt something breaking free from a lifetime of rules and expectations. Whatever came next, it couldn't be worse than this night. Rain poured down as Eleanor's carriage rolled along the muddy road. It had been raining for 3 days, ever since she left her parents' home. The drops hit the roof like tiny drums, matching the beat of her sad heart. She pulled her grey cloak tighter, watching the dark trees pass by through foggy windows. The old driver had told her they would reach Blackthorne Abbey before dark. The sun was already low in the sky, hidden behind thick rain clouds. Eleanor thought about the fast changes in her life. Just 1 week ago, she was Lady Eleanor Harlow, about to marry Lord Pembroke. Now she was property. The Duke of Blackthorne had paid her father's debts in exchange for her. The paper her father signed didn't use the word sold, but Eleanor knew what it meant. She was no longer her own person. "Just ahead, my lady," the driver called through the small window. "Blackthorne Abbey." Eleanor leaned forward to look. Through the rain, she saw tall stone towers reaching up to the stormy sky. The building was huge, with pointed windows and stone carvings of strange beasts. It looked more like a church than a home, or perhaps a prison, she thought. The carriage stopped at big iron gates. A guard in a wet black coat stepped out from a small stone house. "Who comes to Blackthorne Abbey?" he called. "Lady Eleanor Harlow," the driver answered. "The Duke is expecting her." The guard nodded and pulled on a thick chain. The gates opened with a loud creak that made Eleanor jump. The carriage rolled forward again, now on a path lined with old trees that bent in the wind like sad old men. Eleanor's stomach felt tight as they got closer to the huge stone steps leading to the front door. She had heard stories about the Duke of Blackthorne. People said he was mean and scary. They said his first wife fell from a tower window, his second wife got very sick and died, and no one knew what happened to his third wife. She just disappeared one day. Why would he want another wife? Eleanor whispered to herself. What will he do with me? The carriage stopped. A tall woman in a black dress stood at the top of the steps holding a big umbrella. She did not smile as the driver opened Eleanor's door. Lady Eleanor, the woman said, her voice as cold as the rain. I am Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. The Duke asked me to show you to your rooms. He's away on business but will return tomorrow. Eleanor felt both afraid and relieved. She would have one night to get ready before meeting her new husband. She followed Mrs. Winters up the wet steps and through a heavy wooden door that took both the driver and a footman to push open. Inside, the abbey was dark. A few candles burned in tall holders, making shadows dance on the stone walls. Eleanor's wet shoes made small puddles on the floor as she walked. The ceiling was so high she had to tilt her head back to see it. This way, my lady, Mrs. Winters said, leading her up a wide staircase. They walked down a long hall with many closed doors. Eleanor wondered what was behind them. More stairs, more halls, more doors. She tried to remember the way back, but soon felt lost in the maze of the abbey. Finally, Mrs. Winters stopped at a door near the end of a quiet hall. She pulled out a large ring of keys and opened it. These will be your rooms, she said, stepping aside so Eleanor could enter. Eleanor's eyes grew wide. The room was big, much bigger than her bedroom at home. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, making the room warm and casting a soft glow on rich red rugs. A large bed with 4 posts stood against one wall, covered in soft blankets. Big windows looked out over the garden, though now they showed only rain and darkness. There's a sitting room through that door, Mrs. Winters said, pointing, and a small room for your maid. I have no maid, Eleanor said quietly. She stayed with my family. Mrs. Winters frowned. The Duke did not mention that. I will find someone to help you until a proper lady's maid can be hired. Eleanor walked to the window, looking out at the wet garden below. Somewhere beyond it, she knew, were gates and walls. She was as trapped here as a bird in a pretty cage. Dinner will be brought to your room tonight, Mrs. Winters said. The Duke thought you might want to rest after your journey. Thank you, Eleanor said, though she wasn't hungry. When Mrs. Winters left, Eleanor sat in a chair by the fire. For the first time since the night at the Whitmore ball, she let herself cry. Her tears fell hot on her cold hands as she thought of all she had lost. Her home, her family, her place in the world. She cried until her eyes hurt and her throat felt tight. Later, a young maid brought a tray with soup, bread and tea. Eleanor thanked her but ate only a little. The girl helped her change into a nightgown and brushed out her long hair. What's your name? Eleanor asked. Sarah, my lady, the girl said, her hands gentle as she brushed. Sarah. What can you tell me about the Duke? Eleanor asked. What kind of man is he? Sarah's hands stopped for a moment. He's different, my lady. Not like other lords. He keeps to himself mostly. Spends a lot of time in his study or the East Wing. What's in the East Wing? I don't know, my lady. Only the Duke and Dr. Harper go there. We're not allowed. Eleanor thought about this as Sarah finished with her hair. And his other wives? What happened to them? Sarah looked nervous. I shouldn't say, my lady. Mrs. Winters would be angry. Please, Eleanor said. I need to know what to expect. Sarah sighed. They say the First Lady Blackthorne was very sad and jumped from the North Tower. The second got the fever and died in her sleep. The third, she lowered her voice. They say she tried to get into the East Wing to see what the Duke was hiding. She disappeared the next day. The Duke said she ran away, but some think he killed her, Eleanor finished in a whisper. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with fear. But they're just stories, my lady. Servants talk. After Sarah left, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The rain kept falling and the wind made the windows rattle. Every creak and groan of the old building made her heart beat faster. She got up and tried the door to the hall. It wasn't locked. At least she wasn't a prisoner in her room. Taking a candle, Eleanor stepped into the dark hallway. The shadows seemed to move as she walked. She didn't know where she was going, but she needed to learn more about this place that was now her home. She found her way to a large room with shelves from floor to ceiling, all filled with books, a library bigger than any she had seen before. Picking one book, then another, she saw they were about medicine, plants that heal, and the human body. Strange books for a duke to have. Eleanor spent hours reading by candlelight. When her eyes grew tired, she took a book back to her room. It was about women's health problems. As she read, she found pages about women who couldn't have babies and ways to help them. Eleanor's heart beat faster. Why did the Duke have such books? For the next 3 days, the Duke did not return. Eleanor spent her time exploring the parts of the Abbey she was allowed to enter. She read more books from the library. She walked in the garden when the rain stopped, and she wondered about the East Wing, where no one was allowed to go. On the 4th day, as Eleanor sat by the window watching birds in the garden, Mrs. Winters came to her room. "The Duke has returned, my lady," she said. "He wishes to see you in the library in 1 hour." Eleanor's hands shook as she changed into a simple blue dress. Sarah helped fix her hair, pulling it back with silver pins. "You look lovely, my lady," Sarah said with a small smile. "I feel like a lamb being led to slaughter," Eleanor whispered. The walk to the library seemed both too long and too short. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she was sure Mrs. Winters could hear it. The housekeeper knocked on the library door. "Enter," said a deep voice from inside. Mrs. Winters opened the door and stepped aside. "Lady Eleanor, your grace." Eleanor took a deep breath and walked into the room to meet her new husband and whatever fate waited for her at Blackthorne Abbey. The Duke of Blackthorne stood by the library window, a tall shadow against the grey light. He turned as Eleanor entered, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. The scar that ran from his right eye to his jaw looked silver in the afternoon sun. His dark hair had touches of grey at the temples, though he wasn't old, maybe 35 years. His eyes, deep blue like the ocean, watched her with care. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than she expected, "I hope you've been comfortable these past days." Eleanor gave a small curtsy, keeping her eyes down like a proper lady. "Yes, your grace. Thank you." "Please, sit," he said, pointing to 2 chairs by the fire. A small table between them held tea and small cakes. Eleanor sat on the edge of the chair, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. The Duke sat across from her, pouring tea into 2 cups. "I'm sure you have questions," he said, handing her a cup. "About our arrangement." "Why did you buy me?" Eleanor asked, the words coming out before she could stop them. Ladies weren't supposed to be so direct. "Forgive me. I mean, no. Your question is fair," the Duke said. "I needed a wife for social reasons." "You needed to escape a bad situation. It seemed a good match." Eleanor sipped her tea, her hands shaking a little. "And what do you expect of me, your grace?" The Duke looked at her for a long moment. "I expect you to be the Duchess of Blackthorne in public, to attend events with me when needed, to manage the household." He paused. "I do not expect what most husbands demand of their wives." Eleanor felt her cheeks grow hot. She knew what he meant. "You don't want children?" "I have a brother who will inherit if I have no heirs," the Duke said simply. "The Blackthorne line will continue without my help." Relief flooded through Eleanor. She would not have to face more doctors, more shame about her broken body. "I've noticed you've been reading," the Duke said, nodding toward the book in her lap, the one she'd taken from the library. "Yes," Eleanor admitted. "I hope that was allowed." "This is your home now," the Duke said. "The library is yours to use." He looked at the book she held. "You're interested in women's health?" Eleanor nodded. "I wanted to understand. What's wrong with me?" The Duke frowned. "There is nothing wrong with you, Lady Eleanor. The doctors who told you that were fools." Eleanor looked up, surprised. "But I cannot have children. Lord Pembroke broke our engagement because of it." "And in doing so, he proved himself a fool as well," the Duke said. His voice was calm, but Eleanor heard anger under the words. "Many women struggle to have children. Some need help, some need time, some may never conceive, but that does not make them broken or less worthy." Eleanor had never heard anyone talk this way before. "How do you know so much about this?" The Duke stood and walked to a shelf, pulling down another book. "Because before I was a duke, I was a doctor." Eleanor's eyes grew wide. "A doctor? But you're a nobleman." "I am now," he agreed, "but I was the second son, not meant to inherit. I studied medicine in Edinburgh and Paris. I worked with women suffering from all kinds of health problems. He handed her the book, My Research. Eleanor looked at the cover. A study of female reproductive health by Dr. S. Blackthorne. My brother died 5 years ago, the Duke explained. I had to leave my work and take his place, but I still study and write when I can. Is that what's in the East Wing? Eleanor asked. Your medical work? The Duke looked surprised. You've heard about the East Wing already? Yes, I have a laboratory there. I still see patients sometimes. Women who need help. Eleanor thought about the rumours of his 3 wives. And your previous wives? What happened to them? The Duke's face grew sad. Rebecca was very unhappy here. She missed London and hated the countryside. She took her own life. It was a dark time. He looked into the fire. Anne caught the fever that spread through the village 2 years ago. I tried to save her, but I couldn't. And your 3rd wife? Eleanor asked quietly. Clara, the Duke said, his voice hard now. She married me for my money. When she found out about my work, helping poor women who couldn't pay, she was angry, said I was wasting the family fortune. She left one night with my mother's jewels and a young man from the village. They ran away to France. Eleanor didn't know what to say. The stories were so different from the scary rumours. I'm sorry for your loss, she finally said. The Duke nodded. Thank you. He looked at her with those deep blue eyes. I won't lie to you, Lady Eleanor. I'm not an easy man to live with. I work long hours. I'm often lost in my own thoughts. I have a temper, though I try to control it. But I will never hurt you. I will never lock you up. And I will never judge you for what your body can or cannot do. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. After years of being judged for her failure to have a child, his words felt like cool water on a burn. The next morning, after breakfast, there was a knock at Eleanor's door. The Duke stood there, wearing a simple black coat rather than formal clothes. I thought you might like to see the East Wing, he said, if you're interested in my work. Eleanor nodded, excited and a little scared. Yes, I would like that very much. They walked through parts of the Abbey Eleanor hadn't seen before. The Duke used a large key to open a heavy door at the end of a long hall. Beyond it was a bright, clean space with big windows. Tables held glass bottles, papers, and strange tools Eleanor had never seen. This is my laboratory, the Duke explained, where I study and sometimes help patients. What kind of patients? Eleanor asked, looking at charts on the walls showing parts of the human body. Women like you, the Duke said gently, who have been told they cannot have children. Women with monthly pain so bad they cannot work or care for their families. Women whose bodies need help healing after difficult births. Eleanor walked around the room, looking at everything with wide eyes. On one table was a journal open to a page with neat handwriting. She read a few words. Patient shows improvement with the new treatment. The tea made from red raspberry leaf seems to help. You can read my notes if you wish, the Duke said, though I warn you they're not very exciting. I find them very exciting, Eleanor said honestly. I've never been allowed to learn about such things. Women aren't supposed to know how their own bodies work. A stupid rule made by men who fear what they don't understand, the Duke said with a small smile. Would you like to learn? You would teach me? Eleanor asked, not believing what she was hearing. If you wish it, the Duke said. You're clever. I can see it in your eyes, in how quickly you've found your way around the Abbey, in the books you've chosen to read. Over the next weeks, the Duke showed Eleanor his work. He taught her the names of plants that could help women with different problems. He showed her how to mix medicines and how to keep careful notes about what worked and what didn't. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, the Duke asked, Would you like to meet one of my patients? Eleanor looked up from the book she was studying. You mean, be there when you help them? The Duke nodded. Mrs. Collins is coming tomorrow. She's had 3 miscarriages. I've been helping her prepare her body for another try. What would I do? Eleanor asked. Watch. Learn. Perhaps make her feel more comfortable having another woman present. The next day, Eleanor met Mrs. Collins, a young woman from the village with sad eyes but a hopeful smile. Eleanor held her hand while the Duke checked her health and gave her new medicine to try. You're very lucky to have such a kind husband, Your Grace, Mrs. Collins said to Eleanor as she was leaving. Eleanor looked at the Duke, who was writing notes at his desk. Yes, she said, surprised to find she meant it. I believe I am. That night, as Eleanor brushed her hair before bed, she looked in the mirror and saw something new in her face. The sad, shamed look was gone from her eyes. In its place was a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope that she might someday have a child, but hope that she might find purpose in her new life. That she might become more than just someone's wife, that she might help other women like herself. For the first time since coming to Blackthorne Abbey, Eleanor slept without bad dreams. 6 months passed at Blackthorne Abbey, and the cold winter gave way to a bright spring. The gardens burst with new life. Pink roses, yellow daffodils, and purple lavender filled the air with sweet smells. Eleanor walked these paths each morning, breathing in the fresh air before joining the Duke in the East Wing. Today, however, was different. Eleanor stood in her room while Sarah helped her into a fine blue dress with silver buttons. It had been a long time since she'd worn such fancy clothes. "You look beautiful, my lady," Sarah said, fixing a silver pin in Eleanor's hair. "Are you nervous about going to town?" Eleanor nodded, looking at herself in the mirror. Her face had changed in these months. Her eyes were brighter, her cheeks had more colour, and she stood taller. A little. "I haven't seen anyone from society since I came here." "You're the Duchess of Blackthorne now," Sarah reminded her. "They must show you respect." A knock at the door told Eleanor the Duke was waiting. He stood in the hallway in his best black coat, his dark hair neatly combed back from his face. "You look lovely," he said with a small bow. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Eleanor replied with a nervous smile. "Where exactly are we going?" "Edinburgh," the Duke said as they walked down the grand staircase. "There's a meeting of doctors and scientists I attend each year. This time, I thought you might like to come. You've learned so much these past months." Eleanor felt both excited and scared. A meeting of important men, and they would let a woman attend? "Won't they think it strange that you bring your wife?" The Duke helped her into the waiting carriage. "Some will, but Dr. Visconti from Italy will be there. He often brings his daughter to such meetings. She's a fine doctor herself, though not allowed to practice openly because she's a woman." The ride to Edinburgh took most of the day. They stayed in a fine hotel with red carpets and gold mirrors. Eleanor had her own room next to the Duke's, connected by a door they kept open. They weren't truly husband and wife in the normal way, but they had become good friends and partners in the Duke's work. The next morning, Eleanor put on her best dress again, a rich green one that brought out the colour of her eyes. The Duke escorted her to a large building with stone columns. "The Royal College of Physicians," he explained as they climbed the steps. "They're hosting the meeting." Inside, men in fine clothes talked in small groups. They all turned to look when the Duke and Eleanor entered. Eleanor felt her cheeks grow warm as whispers filled the room. "The Duke of Blackthorne. Is that his new wife? I heard he bought her when her engagement was broken. Why would he bring a woman here?" Eleanor kept her head high, just as she had the night of her public shame. The Duke's hand on her arm gave her strength. "Sebastian," called a man with grey hair and kind eyes. "It's good to see you, my friend." "Dr. Murray," the Duke, Sebastian, said with a smile. "Allow me to present my wife, the Duchess of Blackthorne." Dr. Murray bowed to Eleanor. "A pleasure, Your Grace. I've heard much about you." "Good things, I hope," Eleanor said with a small smile. "Indeed," Dr. Murray replied. "Sebastian tells me you've been helping with his research. Most unusual and most impressive." Before Eleanor could answer, another voice called out, "Sebastian, there you are!" A short man with a big moustache approached, followed by a young woman with dark hair and clever eyes. The man spoke with a thick accent Eleanor had never heard before. "Alessandro," Sebastian said, shaking the man's hand. "And Sophia. How wonderful to see you both." "And this must be your new wife," the man said, turning to Eleanor. "I am Dr. Alessandro Visconti from Florence. This is my daughter, Sophia." Eleanor curtsied. "I'm pleased to meet you." Sophia curtsied in return, then spoke in perfect English. "Father has told me of your husband's work helping women. It is close to my own interests." "You're a doctor too?" Eleanor asked, surprised to meet another woman with medical knowledge. "Not officially," Sophia said with a small frown. "In Italy, women cannot be doctors. But I have learned everything my father knows. I help women in secret." "Come," Sebastian said. "The meeting is about to start." They entered a large room with rows of chairs. At the front was a table, where important-looking men sat. Eleanor, Sebastian, and their new friends sat in the third row. Eleanor noticed she and Sophia were the only women in the room. An old man with white hair stood up. "Welcome to our annual meeting. Today we will hear from doctors across Europe about their latest work. First, Sebastian Blackthorne will tell us about his research on women's health issues." Eleanor felt a rush of pride as Sebastian walked to the front of the room. She had helped with this work over the past months, copying his notes and organising his findings. Now these important men would hear about it. Sebastian spoke clearly and with passion about how certain herbs and treatments could help women with different problems. Some men in the room frowned or shook their heads. Others leaned forward, interested. Eleanor watched it all, taking mental notes about who seemed open to new ideas and who did not. When Sebastian finished, Dr. Visconti asked a question about one of the treatments, then another doctor asked something. Soon, a lively discussion was happening. Eleanor wanted to speak up. She had seen the treatment work with her own eyes, but she stayed silent. This was not her place. Not yet. After the meeting, people gathered in small groups to talk more. Dr. Visconti, Sophia, Sebastian, and Eleanor found a quiet corner. "Your research is most impressive," Dr. Visconti said to Sebastian, "especially the work on red raspberry leaf tea. We have seen similar results in Italy." "It was Eleanor who first suggested we try a stronger brew," Sebastian said, surprising Eleanor by giving her credit. She noticed the women who drank it twice a day had better results. Dr. Visconti turned to Eleanor with new interest. "Is that so? You have a scientific mind, Your Grace." "I just observe carefully," Eleanor said modestly. "The Duke is a good teacher." "You should come to Florence," Sophia said excitedly. "We have a small group of women who meet to discuss medical topics. Some are wives of doctors, some are midwives. All are hungry for knowledge." "That sounds wonderful," Eleanor replied, imagining a room full of women like herself, eager to learn and help others. The conversation was interrupted by a loud voice. "Blackthorne, still wasting your time on women's complaints, I see." A tall man with a red face approached their group. He looked at Eleanor with cold eyes. "And this must be your new purchase. I heard you bought her after Pembroke cast her off. Damaged goods, eh?" Eleanor felt like she'd been slapped. Sebastian's face grew dark with anger, but before he could speak, Sophia stepped forward. "Dr. Bennet," she said coolly, "how sad to see you haven't changed, still clinging to old ideas while better doctors move forward." "Dr. Bennet's face grew even redder. "No one asked for your opinion, girl. Women have no place in medicine or science." "And yet," Eleanor said, finding her voice, "it is women who bring all human life into the world. Shouldn't we understand how our own bodies work?" The man looked shocked that she would dare speak to him. He turned to Sebastian. "Control your wife, Blackthorne. Or do you let all your possessions talk back to their betters?" Sebastian stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Dr. Bennet, you will apologize to my wife and Miss Visconti immediately, or I will remind you how we settled disagreements when we were students together." Dr. Bennet looked at Sebastian's clenched fists and took a step back. "No need for that. I meant no offence." He bowed stiffly to Eleanor and Sophia. "Ladies." As he walked away, Dr. Visconti chuckled. Some men fear change more than death itself. That evening, Eleanor and Sebastian had dinner with the Viscontis at a fine restaurant. The food was delicious, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked of medicine, of books, of places they had visited. Eleanor found herself speaking more than she ever had in society before. No one told her to be quiet or to let the men talk. They asked for her thoughts and listened to her answers. "You must visit us in Florence," Dr. Visconti insisted as the evening ended. "Our home is always open to you both." "We would be honoured," Sebastian replied, looking at Eleanor with a question in his eyes. "Yes," she agreed, "I would like that very much." As they walked back to their hotel, snow began to fall softly around them. Eleanor looked up at the night sky, feeling the cold flakes on her warm cheeks. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Sebastian asked. "For bringing me here. For showing me that there can be more to life than being someone's wife or mother. For helping me see that I'm not broken." Sebastian stopped walking and turned to face her. In the light of the street lamps, his blue eyes looked almost black. "Eleanor," he said gently, "you are the strongest person I know. What others saw as a flaw, I see as a gift. You understand the pain of women who have been told they are less because of what their bodies cannot do. That understanding makes you a better healer than I could ever be." Eleanor felt tears in her eyes, but for once they were not sad tears. For the first time in her life, someone saw her true worth. In the Duke's eyes, she was not a broken doll, but a whole person with gifts to share. As they continued walking, their hands brushed against each other. Eleanor didn't pull away. Neither did Sebastian. Their fingers linked together in the quiet, snowy night as they made their way back to the hotel, two people who had found in each other something they never expected: understanding. Summer came to Blackthorne Abbey, bringing warm days and gentle breezes. The rose garden burst with red, pink and white blooms that filled the air with sweet smells. Eleanor spent more time outdoors now, often reading in a small stone gazebo covered with climbing roses. Today, she held a letter from Sofia Visconti, her friend from Italy. "More news from Florence?" Sebastian asked, joining her in the gazebo. He wore a simple white shirt and dark pants instead of his usual formal clothes. His hair had grown a bit longer, and the summer sun had added golden streaks to the brown. Eleanor smiled, looking up from the letter. "Yes. Sophia says they're starting a small school to teach women about their own health. They're calling it the Ladies' Medical Academy. Isn't that wonderful?" "It is," Sebastian agreed, sitting beside her on the stone bench. "Will they be able to do such a thing without trouble?" "They're saying it's just for women to be better wives and mothers," Eleanor explained. "But really they'll learn true medical knowledge." She folded the letter carefully. "Sophia asks if we might visit in the autumn. She wants me to speak to the women about our work." Sebastian watched her face with a gentle look in his blue eyes. "Would you like to go?" "Very much," Eleanor admitted. She had changed in the year since coming to Blackthorne Abbey. She was no longer the quiet, proper lady who feared speaking out of turn. Working alongside Sebastian in the laboratory had given her confidence. Helping the women who came to them had given her purpose. "Then we shall go," Sebastian said simply. He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. "But first, I have a surprise for you." "What kind of surprise?" Eleanor asked, curious. "I've been invited to speak at the Royal Medical Society in London next month," Sebastian explained. "I'd like you to come with me." Eleanor felt her heart beat faster. "London? But that would mean—" "Yes," Sebastian nodded. "We would see people from your old life, people who might not be kind." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I think it's time to show them the remarkable woman you've become." Eleanor looked out at the garden, thinking. Going to London meant facing her past. Lord Pembroke, her parents, the society that had rejected her. The thought made her stomach tight with fear. But she was different now, stronger. "Will I be allowed at the medical talk?" she asked. "I've made it a condition of my speaking," Sebastian said with a small smile. "They were not happy, but they want my research badly enough to agree." Eleanor thought for another minute, then nodded. "Yes, let's go to London." The next weeks were busy with planning. Eleanor needed new dresses for London society. Sebastian sent for the finest dressmaker in Edinburgh, who came to the Abbey with silks and laces. "Nothing too flashy," Eleanor told the dressmaker. "I want to look like a proper duchess, but I don't need to draw attention." The woman nodded, measuring Eleanor's waist. "You have such a lovely figure, Your Grace. What about this deep blue silk? It would bring out your eyes." Eleanor touched the fabric. Once she would have chosen based on what others would think. Now she chose what she liked. Yes, the blue, and perhaps that green as well. August arrived, hot and bright. Eleanor and Sebastian's trunks were packed, and the carriage waited in front of the Abbey. Mrs. Winters stood on the steps, giving last instructions to the servants who would stay behind. "Are you ready?" Sebastian asked as he helped Eleanor into the carriage. She took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The journey to London took 3 days. They stayed at nice inns along the way, sharing meals and talking about their research. At night they slept in separate rooms, as always. Their marriage was a partnership of minds, not bodies, though Eleanor sometimes wondered if it might become more. The way Sebastian looked at her sometimes made her heart beat faster. London was hot and crowded and noisy after the quiet of the Abbey. Their carriage moved slowly through streets packed with people, horses and other carriages. The air smelled of smoke, horses and too many people. Eleanor had forgotten how busy the city was. They stayed at Sebastian's London house, a tall building with white columns on a fancy street. It wasn't as big as the Abbey, but it was grand enough to show his wealth and position. The servants lined up to greet them, bowing and curtsying to their master and mistress. "The house has been prepared as you requested, Your Grace," the butler told Sebastian, "and the invitations have arrived." "Invitations?" Eleanor asked once they were alone in the sitting room. Sebastian handed her a small stack of cream-coloured cards. "Word has spread that the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorne are in London. Society is curious." Eleanor looked through the cards. Dinners, balls, musical evenings, all the events she used to attend as Lady Eleanor Harlow. One name made her stop. The Whitmores are having a ball, Sebastian watched her face. The same Whitmores who hosted the event where Lord Pembroke publicly broke our engagement, Eleanor finished. Yes. We don't have to attend, Sebastian said gently. Eleanor looked at the invitation for a long moment. No, I think we should. I ran away that night. This time, I'll hold my head high. The Royal Medical Society meeting came first. Eleanor wore her new blue silk dress as she sat in the front row, watching Sebastian present their research. He spoke of the treatments they had developed, the women they had helped, and the careful records they had kept, and to Eleanor's surprise and joy he gave her credit for her contributions. My wife, the Duchess of Blackthorne, has been essential to this work, he told the room full of doctors. Her observations and insights have shaped our approach. Some men frowned or whispered to each other. Others nodded, interested. One old doctor even took notes when Sebastian described Eleanor's method for brewing the special tea. After the talk, a group gathered around Sebastian to ask questions. Eleanor stood nearby, listening. Then she felt someone watching her. She turned to see a woman about her age looking at her with curious eyes. "Forgive me for staring," the woman said, stepping closer. "But are you not Lady Eleanor Harlow? I mean, you're the Duchess of Blackthorne now, of course." Eleanor nodded, trying to place the familiar face. "Yes, and you are." "Lady Margaret Winters," the woman said. "We met at several events before you left London." "Of course," Eleanor said, remembering a quiet girl who rarely spoke at parties. "It's nice to see you again, Lady Margaret." "I hope you don't mind my asking," Lady Margaret said, lowering her voice, "but is it true what they say, that the Duke bought you from your parents after your engagement ended?" Eleanor felt a flash of anger, but kept her face calm. "The Duke and my father had a business arrangement, yes, but I agreed to the marriage. It was my choice." Lady Margaret looked surprised. "Your choice, but people say many things," Eleanor cut in. "Few of them true." She smiled slightly. "I'm very happy with my husband. He values me for my mind, not just as a potential mother for his children." "How unusual," Lady Margaret said, but she seemed more impressed than scandalized. "I've heard rumors that you work with him on his medical research. Is that true?" "It is," Eleanor said proudly. "In fact, several of the treatments he discussed today were my ideas." Lady Margaret's eyes grew wide. That's amazing. I never thought a woman could do such things." "Neither did I once," Eleanor admitted, "but we can do more than society tells us if given the chance." Their conversation was interrupted by Sebastian, who came to Eleanor's side. "Lady Margaret," he said with a polite bow, "I see you've been keeping my wife company." "Yes, Your Grace," Lady Margaret replied with a curtsy. "She was telling me about your work together. It sounds fascinating." Sebastian smiled at Eleanor with obvious pride. "My wife has a brilliant mind. I'm fortunate she shares it with me." Later that week came the Whitmore Ball. Eleanor spent extra time getting ready, making sure every hair was in place, every fold of her green silk dress perfect. She wore the diamond necklace Sebastian had given her as a wedding gift, which sparkled in the candlelight. "You look beautiful," Sebastian said when she came downstairs. He offered his arm. "Remember, we can leave at any time." "I won't run away this time," Eleanor promised. The Whitmore house looked just as Eleanor remembered. Bright lights, music, flowers everywhere. As they entered, the butler announced them loudly. His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorne, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackthorne. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to watch them descend the stairs. Eleanor kept her head high, her hand steady on Sebastian's arm. She was no longer the shamed girl who had run from this house in tears. She was the Duchess of Blackthorne, respected partner to her husband, a woman with purpose and pride. Mrs. Whitmore hurried to greet them, her face a mix of surprise and excitement. "Your Graces, how wonderful that you could attend. It's been so long since we've seen you in London, Duchess." "Yes, we've been busy with our work at the Abbey," Eleanor replied calmly. "But it's nice to visit London occasionally." As they moved through the crowd, Eleanor felt the stares and heard the whispers. She ignored them, focusing instead on the music, the flowers, the food. Sebastian stayed close by her side, his tall figure like a shield between her and the curious eyes. Then, across the room, Eleanor saw him. Lord Pembroke stood with a pretty young woman who was clearly expecting a baby. Her round belly pressed against her pink silk dress. "Are you all right?" Sebastian asked, following her gaze. "Yes," Eleanor said, surprised to find she meant it. "I feel nothing for him now. No anger, no hurt, just nothing." Sebastian smiled. "Would you like to say hello? Show him what he lost?" Eleanor thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, he's not worth our time." But it seemed Lord Pembroke had other ideas. He whispered something to his wife and then made his way across the room toward Eleanor and Sebastian. "Your Graces," he said with a stiff bow. "What a surprise to see you in London society." "Lord Pembroke," Sebastian replied coolly. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Sebastian Blackthorne." "Yes, I know who you are," Lord Pembroke said, his eyes moving to Eleanor. "You look well, Lady Eleanor. I mean, Duchess." "Thank you," Eleanor said simply. "As to you, I see congratulations are in order. Your wife is expecting." Lord Pembroke looked uncomfortable. "Yes, we're very blessed. 5 months along now." Eleanor felt Sebastian's hand on her back, warm and supportive. She smiled at Lord Pembroke. "I wish you both happiness." She turned to walk away, but Lord Pembroke spoke again. "I heard a strange rumour, Duchess. They say you work with your husband on his medical research. Surely that can't be true?" Eleanor looked him directly in the eye. "It is completely true. In fact, we've had great success treating women who struggle to have children. Perhaps if we'd met a few years later, things might have turned out differently between us." Lord Pembroke's face flushed red. Before he could reply, Sebastian spoke. "If you'll excuse us, my wife promised me a dance." As they walked away, Eleanor felt lighter than air. She had faced her past and found it had no power over her anymore. As Sebastian led her onto the dance floor and took her in his arms, she realized something else. She was falling in love with her husband. Not because he had saved her, but because he had helped her save herself. Autumn painted Blackthorne Abbey in shades of gold, orange, and red. Leaves drifted down from the tall trees lining the long driveway. Inside, fires burned in every fireplace to keep the chill away. Eleanor sat in the east wing, carefully measuring dried herbs for a new medicine they were testing. The scales balanced perfectly as she added tiny amounts of each plant. Sebastian entered the room, holding a letter. His face looked serious, which made Eleanor stop her work. "What is it?" she asked, putting down the small spoon she was using. "A letter from your mother," Sebastian said, handing it to her. "It arrived this morning." Eleanor's hand shook slightly as she took it. In the 15 months since coming to Blackthorne Abbey, she had not heard from her parents, not a single letter or visit. She opened the paper carefully and read the neat handwriting. "My father is sick," she said, looking up at Sebastian. "Very sick. Mother asks if I will come to see him before." She couldn't finish the sentence. Sebastian knelt beside her chair. "Do you want to go?" Eleanor thought about her father, who had sold her to pay his debts. But he was still her father. "Yes," she said quietly. "I should see him one last time." "Then we'll leave tomorrow," Sebastian said, taking her hand. Eleanor looked at their joined hands. "Will you come with me? To my parents' house?" "Of course," Sebastian said. "I'll be with you every step of the way." The journey to the Harlow estate took a full day. The carriage bumped along country roads lined with trees dropping their red and gold leaves. Eleanor watched the familiar landscape pass by, remembering how she had felt the last time she travelled this road. Angry, scared, ashamed. Now she felt calm but sad, thinking about her father lying sick in his bed. Sebastian sat across from her, watching her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different I am now," Eleanor replied. "Last time I was on this road, I felt like my life was over. Now I know it was just beginning." Sebastian smiled, his blue eyes warm with feeling. "You've bloomed at the Abbey, like a flower that just needed the right soil." Eleanor returned his smile, feeling a flutter in her chest. Over the past months, something had changed between them. Small touches, longer looks, quiet moments by the fire. Their friendship had grown into something deeper, but neither had spoken of it yet. The Harlow house looked smaller than Eleanor remembered. The gardens weren't as neat, and the paint on the front door was peeling. A young maid answered their knock, her eyes growing wide when she saw who it was. "Lady Eleanor," she gasped, then corrected herself. "I mean, Your Grace. We didn't know when to expect you." "Hello, Mary," Eleanor said, stepping into the house that had once been her home. "Is my mother here?" "In the drawing room, Your Grace," Mary said, curtsying. "I'll announce you." "No need," Eleanor said, already walking toward the familiar room. Sebastian followed quietly. Lady Harlow sat by the window, looking older and thinner than Eleanor remembered. She stood quickly when Eleanor entered. "Eleanor," she said, her voice catching. For a moment, she looked like she might hug her daughter, but then she remembered her manners and curtsied instead. "Your Grace, thank you for coming." "Mother," Eleanor said with a small nod, "this is my husband, the Duke of Blackthorne." Sebastian bowed politely. "Lady Harlow, I'm sorry we meet under such sad circumstances." Lady Harlow looked from Sebastian to Eleanor, her eyes taking in how they stood close together, how comfortable they seemed with each other. "Yes, well, thank you for bringing my daughter home." "How is father?" Eleanor asked. "Not well," Lady Harlow admitted. "The doctor says it's his heart. He has little time left." She hesitated, then added, "He asks for you every day. I think he regrets many things." "I'll see him now," Eleanor said. "I'll wait here," Sebastian told her, squeezing her hand quickly. Eleanor climbed the stairs to her father's bedroom, her heart beating fast. What would she say to him? What could either of them say to make right what had happened? The room was dark. With heavy curtains blocking most of the light, it smelled of medicine and sickness. Lord Harlow lay in his big bed, looking small and grey against the white sheets. His eyes were closed, but they opened when Eleanor approached. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice weak, "is it really you?" "Yes, father," she said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "I came as soon as I got mother's letter." Lord Harlow's thin hand reached for hers. "My girl, my poor girl, can you ever forgive me?" Eleanor looked at her father's face, seeing the regret in his tired eyes. "What happened was wrong," she said honestly. "You treated me like property, not a daughter." "I know," he whispered. "I was desperate. The debts. I thought I was saving you from poverty." "By selling me to a man you thought was a monster," Eleanor said. "You didn't even try to learn what kind of man he was." "And what kind of man is he?" Lord Harlow asked, his eyes searching her face. Eleanor's expression softened. "The best kind. Kind, smart, respectful. He sees me as a partner, not a possession. He values my mind and my ideas. He's given me purpose." "You love him," Lord Harlow said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes, though we've never spoken of it." "Then perhaps some good came from my terrible choice," Lord Harlow said, a tear sliding down his wrinkled cheek. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Eleanor, but I'm so sorry." Eleanor felt tears in her own eyes. "I forgive you, father. I'm not the same scared girl you sent away. I'm stronger now, happier." Lord Harlow closed his eyes, exhausted by the conversation. "Stay a few days? Let me get to know the woman my daughter has become." "We'll stay," Eleanor promised. Downstairs, she found Sebastian and her mother sitting in awkward silence. "He's resting now," Eleanor told them. "He's asked us to stay for a few days." "Of course," Lady Harlow said. "I'll have Mary prepare your rooms." "Room?" Sebastian corrected gently. "My wife and I share a room." Eleanor looked at him in surprise. They had never shared a room at the Abbey. Each night they said goodbye at her door. His eyes met hers, full of meaning she couldn't quite read. "As you wish, Your Grace," Lady Harlow said, ringing for the maid. Later, after a quiet dinner, Eleanor and Sebastian went to the garden. The night air was cool and the stars shone brightly above them. Eleanor wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Are you cold?" Sebastian asked. "A little," she admitted. He put his arm around her, pulling her close to his side. They walked in silence for a while, following the paths Eleanor had known since childhood. "Thank you for coming with me," she said at last. "It would have been harder alone." "I will always be there when you need me," Sebastian replied. "You know that, don't you?" Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why did you tell my mother we share a room?" Sebastian's face was hard to read in the moonlight. "Because I hoped that tonight we might start something new, if you want to." Eleanor's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "When I bought you from your father," Sebastian said, taking both her hands in his, "I told myself it was just a business arrangement. You needed to escape, and I needed a wife for appearances. But these past months..." He paused, searching for words. Eleanor, you've become everything to me. My partner, my friend, my inspiration. I find myself thinking of you all the time, wanting to be near you. Sebastian, Eleanor whispered, her voice shaking. I'm trying to say that I love you, he continued, not as my purchased bride, but as the remarkable woman you are, the woman you've always been, even when the world couldn't see it. He touched her cheek gently. I don't expect you to feel the same. Our arrangement can continue as it has if that's what you want, but I needed you to know. Eleanor felt tears fill her eyes again, but these were happy tears. I love you too, she said. I think I have for a long time. Sebastian's face lit up with joy. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were soft and warm against hers. Eleanor's arms went around his neck as she kissed him back. The stars seemed to spin above them as they stood together in the garden where Eleanor had played as a child. When they finally pulled apart, Sebastian pressed his forehead against hers. Will you be my wife in truth, Eleanor? Not because of a contract or a business deal, but because we choose each other? Yes, Eleanor answered without hesitation. I choose you, Sebastian. I choose the life we've built together. They spent 3 days at the Harlow house. Eleanor sat with her father for hours, telling him about her work at the Abbey, the women they had helped, and their plans to write a book together. Lord Harlow listened with pride growing in his tired eyes. You found your place in the world, he told her on their last day. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Eleanor held his hand, knowing it might be the last time. Thank you, father. Rest now. That night, Eleanor and Sebastian truly became husband and wife. In the quiet of their room, with moonlight streaming through the window, they shared their first night together. His touch was gentle, his words loving. Eleanor found joy she had never imagined possible. In the morning, as they prepared to leave, Lady Harlow pulled Eleanor aside. You're happy, she said, sounding surprised. Truly happy? I am, Eleanor confirmed. What began as a business arrangement has become a love match. Lady Harlow looked thoughtful. Then perhaps your father and I did one thing right, even if for all the wrong reasons. Perhaps, Eleanor agreed. Goodbye, mother. I'll write to you. As their carriage pulled away from the Harlow house, Sebastian took Eleanor's hand. Where to now, my love? Back to the Abbey. Eleanor shook her head. No, I think it's time we visited Florence, don't you? To see Sophia and her father, and the Ladies' Medical Academy, Sebastian smiled. A perfect plan. A new chapter begins. Eleanor looked back once at her childhood home, then turned to face forward, toward her future with the man she loved. What had started as the darkest day of her life had led her to light she never could have imagined. The small stone chapel at Blackthorne Abbey glowed with the light of 100 white candles. Flowers filled every corner, roses from the garden, wild daisies from the meadow, and small purple lavender that made the air smell sweet. Only 20 people sat in the wooden pews, nothing like the 200 guests who would have attended Eleanor's wedding to Lord Pembroke. Eleanor stood in a small room off the chapel, looking at herself in a tall mirror. Her dress was simple but beautiful, cream-coloured silk that flowed to the floor like water. Her dark hair was pinned up with tiny white flowers instead of diamonds or pearls. Around her neck hung a single pearl on a silver chain, Sebastian's gift to her that morning. Are you ready, my lady? Sarah asked, fixing the last flower in Eleanor's hair. After 2 years as Eleanor's maid, Sarah was more like a friend. Yes, Eleanor said, smiling at her reflection. More ready than I've ever been. A knock at the door made them both turn. Dr. Murray, Sebastian's old friend from Edinburgh, stood there in his best coat. It's time, Your Grace. Eleanor took his arm. When they had planned this second wedding, a true wedding of love, not business, Eleanor had asked Dr. Murray to walk her down the aisle. Her own father had died 3 months earlier, never fully recovering from his illness. The chapel doors opened, and Eleanor saw Sebastian waiting by the altar. He wore a dark blue coat that matched his eyes. His face lit up when he saw her, his smile so full of love it made Eleanor's heart skip. The walk down the aisle felt like floating. Eleanor saw Sophia Visconti and her father sitting in the front row, along with Mrs. Winters, Sarah, and the other staff from the Abbey who had become like family. Her mother sat alone on the other side, looking both sad and proud. Sebastian reached for her hand as she joined him at the altar. You are so beautiful, he whispered. The old village priest began the ceremony. We gather today to celebrate the love between Sebastian and Eleanor, who have found in each other true partnership and joy. The words were different from those used at fancy London weddings. Nothing about duty or family names or heirs. Instead, the priest spoke of love, respect, and walking through life together as equals. When it was time for their vows, Sebastian took both of Eleanor's hands in his. "Eleanor, when you first came to Blackthorne Abbey, you were a stranger I had bought with gold. Now, you are the other half of my heart, the partner of my mind, the joy of my days. I promise to love you, respect you, and stand beside you in all things. You have made me a better man, a better doctor, and a better human being. I choose you today and every day for the rest of our lives." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she spoke her own vows. "Sebastian, you saw worth in me when others saw only failure. You gave me a home when I was lost, knowledge when I was hungry to learn, and love when I least expected it. I promise to be your partner in all things, to share your work and your dreams, to love you with my whole heart. What began as a business arrangement has become the greatest blessing of my life. I choose you, Sebastian, today and forever." The priest blessed simple gold rings, which they placed on each other's fingers. Then Sebastian leaned down and kissed Eleanor gently, sealing their vows. "I present to you the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorne," the priest announced, though of course they had been married by law for 2 years already. But this was their true wedding day. Instead of a grand ball like the one that would have followed her wedding to Lord Pembroke, Eleanor and Sebastian hosted a simple dinner in the Abbey's dining room. The long table was filled with good food, wine, and laughter. Sophia told funny stories about medical school in Italy, where she had finally been allowed to study openly. Dr. Visconti raised a toast to the finest medical minds in England, who happened to be a husband and wife. Late that evening, Eleanor found her mother sitting alone in a quiet corner. "Are you well, mother?" Eleanor asked, sitting beside her. "Yes, dear," Lady Harlow said, patting Eleanor's hand. "Just thinking about how wrong your father and I were. We thought we were selling you to a monster. Instead, we sent you to the man who would truly love you." "We can't change the past," Eleanor said gently, "but the future is still ours to shape." "You were always wiser than we gave you credit for," Lady Harlow said with a sad smile. "Your father realized that at the end." Eleanor hugged her mother, forgiving the past and grateful for the present. Across the room, Sebastian watched her with loving eyes. 3 weeks later, Eleanor and Sebastian stood on the deck of a ship bound for Italy. The wind blew Eleanor's hair around her face as they watched England disappear behind them. Sebastian's arm was warm around her waist. "Excited?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Very," Eleanor replied. "I can't wait to see the Ladies' Medical Academy. Sophia says they have 30 students already." And eager to meet the famous Duchess of Blackthorne, who helps her husband treat the untreatable, Sebastian added with a smile. "Your reputation has spread, my love." The voyage took 10 days. Eleanor loved watching the sea change colours as they sailed south, from grey to deep blue to bright turquoise near the Italian coast. The air grew warmer each day, filled with new smells and sounds. Florence welcomed them with bright sunshine and streets full of beautiful buildings. The Visconti's home was a tall stone house near the river, with a garden full of herbs and flowers Eleanor had never seen before. "Eleanor! Sebastian!" Sophia called, running to meet their carriage. She hugged Eleanor tightly, then Sebastian. "Welcome to Florence. Father is waiting inside, but he's so excited to show you the academy." The Ladies' Medical Academy was hidden in plain sight, a pretty building that looked like a finishing school for young ladies. But inside, women of all ages learned real medical science. Eleanor walked through the classrooms, watching women draw detailed pictures of the human body, mix medicines, and read medical books that had been translated from Latin into Italian so they could understand them. "This is amazing," Eleanor told Sophia as they watched a group of women practice setting a broken arm on a wooden model. "I never imagined anything like this was possible." "Neither did most of these women," Sophia replied. But once they saw what was possible, they couldn't go back to thinking small. For the next 6 months, Eleanor and Sebastian lived in a small house near the Viscontis. Every day, Eleanor taught at the academy, sharing what she had learned about women's health. Sebastian worked with Dr. Visconti at the hospital, learning new techniques to bring back to England. In the evenings, they explored the beautiful city, ate delicious food in small restaurants, and talked for hours with new friends who shared their ideas and dreams. No one in Florence cared that Eleanor had once been sold, because she couldn't have children. Here she was respected for her mind and her work. One warm spring evening, Eleanor sat on their small balcony, watching the sunset turn the city's buildings to gold. Sebastian joined her, bringing 2 glasses of sweet Italian wine. "Happy?" he asked, sitting beside her. "More than I ever thought possible," Eleanor replied honestly. "I was just thinking about that night at the Whitmore ball, when my engagement to Lord Pembroke was broken. I thought my life was over." "And now?" Sebastian asked, taking her hand. Eleanor smiled. "Now I know it was just beginning. Everything I thought I wanted. To be a proper lady, to have a traditional marriage, to be what society expected. None of it would have made me happy." Sebastian kissed her hand. "I have news," he said, his blue eyes twinkling with excitement. "Dr. Visconti has convinced the hospital board to let you observe a surgery tomorrow. No woman has ever been allowed in the operating room before." Eleanor's eyes grew wide. "Truly? They'll let me watch?" "Not just watch," Sebastian said proudly. "Dr. Visconti told them about your skill with herbs and medicines. They want your advice on a special case, a woman with the same condition you once had." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. "To think that my greatest shame might help another woman find hope." "You turned pain into purpose," Sebastian said. "That's your greatest gift, Eleanor." Later that night, as they lay in each other's arms, Eleanor thought about the strange path her life had taken. From the pampered daughter of a noble family, to a woman sold to pay her father's debts, to a duchess who helped other women heal. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked sleepily, his fingers playing with her hair. "How sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing," Eleanor replied. "If Lord Pembroke hadn't rejected me, if my parents hadn't sold me to you, I would never have found this life. I would never have found you." Sebastian pulled her closer. "Then I must remember to thank Lord Pembroke if I ever see him again," he joked. "His loss was my greatest gain." "And mine," Eleanor whispered. The next morning, as they walked hand in hand to the hospital, Eleanor thought about all the women she had helped at Blackthorne Abbey, and all those she would help in the future. Women like her, who had been told they were broken or worthless because their bodies didn't work the way men thought they should. The bright Italian sun warmed her face as they climbed the hospital steps. Inside, doctors and students waited to hear her thoughts, to learn from her experience. No longer a possession to be bought and sold, but a healer in her own right. "Ready?" Sebastian asked, squeezing her hand. Eleanor smiled up at the man who'd seen her true value when everyone else saw only her flaws. "Ready," she said. Together, they walked through the hospital doors toward a future brighter than either could have imagined when their story began.